Hi! This is my reading wrap up for the second quarter of the year, meaning April, May and June. In Q2 of 2026, I managed to read 60 books in total. In April, I read 23 books. In May, I read 20 books. And in June, I read 17 books. It took me a long time to narrow down the top reads of the quarter because I genuinely read so many good books. So I decided to categorize them. I'm going to list the books that I liked, that I thought were very good, but which are already very popular. So there is actually no need for me to talk about them because I feel like everybody and their mother is already talking about them. How I gauged whether or not a book was popular was I looked at the number of ratings on Goodreads. So the books that I'm not going to discuss but that I'm going to only list are the books that have gotten maybe 10,000 and more ratings on Goodreads. Like the ratings are in the 5 figures, whereas the books that I do want to give a bit more time and attention are the books that have gotten maybe like 3,000 ratings, 1.9 thousand ratings. They are not receiving the hype that I think they should be receiving. So let's get into it. So these 10 books are very popular. I don't think I need to sell them to you because they are already being sold. People are buying them. To start with, The Employees by Olga Ravn. This is experimental, sci-fi-ish. It's set in space. It's set in a spaceship. I would say that it is quite existential. You look at the title, The Employees, right? Are you an employee? I am an employee. Are you happy at your job? Let's not answer that question. Are there things at your job that make your life hard? Yes, right? Have. Everybody has it. This book doesn't answer those questions outrightly, but I do think that it does try to make the reader think a little harder about what is their relationship to work, to their company, to labor, to capitalism. Book 2, The Push. This is also really popular. I think everybody is reading it right now. Is it because there's a movie? I don't know if there's a movie. I read it because somebody told me that it was about what happens if you were a mother and you happen to be raising a psychopath. Perhaps it's not a common fear because most mothers have very mundane fears, right? They fear their children getting kidnapped or injured or hit by a car because they weren't looking at the road when they were crossing, things like that. But if you are a mother, do you ever think like, oh, what if I am raising a serial killer? Or if you have a boy, what if I'm raising the next serial rapist? How does one deal with that? This book still lives in my head rent-free. I'm glad that more people are reading it, but I am worried that people are going to twist this book and say like, oh, you know, you shouldn't have children because they might turn out to be psychopaths. I think there are good reasons to not have children, but to reduce the psychopath population in the world is not a good reason. MOLKA by Monika Kim. Really popular, deservedly so. I have seen negative reviews. This is misandry, femgore. It's just for women who like to see men get killed. I can't really understand those responses because, you know, on Twitter, okay, maybe not everyone's on Twitter, there are Korean women who make it a point to post about the things that are being covered on Korean daily news that do not make it onto international news platforms. A lot of these cases are about violence against women. I think a really good book to read before reading this book is Flowers of Fire by Hwang because it really gives you the context. Really commonplace violence against women simply because they are women and simply because there are no laws to protect women. If you just pick it up without knowing anything or without having absorbed that kind of context, it might be difficult to appreciate what the author is trying to do here. Definitely research the topic and read Flowers of Fire. Book 4, Yesteryear by Caro Burke. Everyone's reading this book, right? When I read it, I couldn't put it down. I found the plot really crazy, but at the same time, I was just so compelled by the character. Even if I knew like where she was going to end up, I wanted to see it with my own eyes. Very interesting book if you are familiar with the concept of a trad wife. So they're like a new form of family vloggers, don't you think? Book 5, Between Two Fires by Christopher Buehlman. This book is an old book, but it is trending again. I think because some anniversary special reprinting is happening, which is why like everybody is like reading this book again. Have you ever read A Little Trickery? It's a little bit like that, but I would say a bit more gritty. So it's about this guy who used to commit crime for a living. There are reasons why he ended up like that in that sort of life. He ends up becoming the guardian of a little girl who seems to be the human embodiment of Jesus. It's fairly obvious to me from the start. It's so touching. It's like found family, but it's also a lot of killing, threat of rape. It's that time period, right? If you are good with historical fantasy, strongly recommend Between Two Fires. Next book, The Summer War by Naomi Novik. Look at the name. It's a popular name. Everybody knows Naomi Novik. This book doesn't really need selling. I would say that some people do find it disappointing because it is like a short book. It's a novella. If you have read her other books, you'll be like, oh, this book just seems to be talking about the outline of her other books. It's intentional. She is trying to point out the conventions of the genre, and it's very nostalgic to read, especially if you grew up reading her other books and if you like reading books where there is a fae world and then there's a human world, and then the fae and humans, maybe they fight or they fall in love or they go to war. There are all these conventions, right, about outwitting the fae, about humans, we don't have long lives and we don't have indestructibility, but we have our wits. It's that kind of story, but it's that kind of story that's also pointing out that it is that kind of story. Makes sense? Even though it's really short, I still found it a really good example of the genre. Next, The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgson. This is not dark academia. I went into it thinking it was dark academia, and I was wrong. It's actually a really good book. I was hooked, actually. I couldn't put it down, even though it's already popular within fantasy circles. I do think that people who don't read fantasy would still find this enjoyable. It's a really good example of adult fantasy. The story, the plot, the characters, everything is geared towards adults. The characters, they are all adults. It's not about like 17-year-old teenagers being horny for each other, which I really appreciate. So I think I am definitely gonna read book 2 and book 3. Book 2 is coming out this year. Very exciting. So this is a good time to start reading book 1. The last 3 books of my very short list. GLYPH by Ellie Smith. It sounds just like her other book, GLYPH, G-L-I-F-F, because this is book 2. I hope that it's gonna become a quartet. I really do hope so. Like her seasonal quartet. I love everything that she writes. I think she writes in such a way that it's almost as if you are in the scene with them. She is saying some things about how narratives are twisted, perhaps also about the kind of stories that descendants tell themselves about violence that their ancestors were inflicting or involved in. It might be too subtle for some people, I think, but at the same time it seems to be kind of intentional. How she herself is hiding a message underneath a story. The characters themselves are also telling stories to hide other stories. Definitely literary fiction. Not very straightforward. Not everybody's cup of tea. Maggie, or A Man and a Woman Walk into a Bar by Katie E. This book made me feel like I couldn't decide how I was feeling. She's talking about something that's very sad. Being cheated on, her husband leaves her, they have 2 children. I mean, what can she do, right? She still wanted to have her pride. And then she finds out that she has cancer. So she names the tumor in her breast after her husband's mistress. When you are reading it, you can kind of tell that the narrator is trying very hard to cope in a way that also helps you cope. I found myself very emotionally affected. And the last book in this list, Sisters in Yellow by Mieko Kawakami. Everyone's reading this book, which I think is good because it does present a different kind of Japanese story. Personally, I don't really do healing fiction, but self-help couched as fiction, I feel it's a little bit deceptive. So okay, like arguably a lot of books can be considered healing. If you find it healing, then it's your type of healing fiction. There are a lot of books that I would say are healing fiction to me, even though people inside are like dying and getting killed and going through it. There is a kind of a reader catharsis. This book doesn't really have much of reader catharsis, but it's a really dense and interesting character study of a young girl who grew up in a financially very insecure household. There is no money, basically. She had to raise herself. She becomes overly attached to a older woman who is her mom's friend. When she grows up, she makes friends with other girls her age, but she ends up sort of being the mother of the group, and her anxiety and her abandonment issues are like coming to the forefront. It's not enjoyable in the traditional sense, but it's very much worth reading. Okay, now I'm going to talk about some books that I had really high expectations for, but they turned out to be a bit of a bummer. So I usually don't do hate reviews unless it's saying something very damaging or something that is very hurtful for a marginalized community. There is no point. I don't really do book bashing unless I am really very angry, especially if like a particular book is very popular but it's doing something very harmful. Then I would get really angry and I will say something. This is not like a bashing session. I just wanted to point out the books that I was initially very attracted to because I read the synopsis, I looked at the title, I looked at the cover, and I was like, this is the kind of book that it seems like I would like it. But then when I went into it, there was just something that made it not so easy to read for me personally. The first one is She Made Herself a Monster by Anna Kovatcheva. The prose is undeniably very lyrical, so it's not the writing style that I have an issue with. For me, the main issue in this book was that the plot didn't have enough filling. So this book looks like it should be book 2. So book 1 should have been about the captain and Yulia, especially Yulia, who is so interesting. How the captain ended up being the guardian of these 2 children. Then now we have book 2, just this book. The children have grown up, they have grown estranged. It's just fucked up because the guy that raised them is trying to marry the girl because he has a thing for her mother. So she's been hiding her period from him because if he knows that she's menstruating, he will marry her, you know, basically force her to have sex with him. The boy that was also raised by this horrible guy, I don't understand his motivations. It's like you love your cousin, but then you are willing to sell her out to this horrible guy that you know is going to rape her. Why don't you do something about it? The characterization was just very inconsistent. I mean, it's okay to have villains and to have shitty people. I think that's very reflective of real life, but even if it wasn't, it's totally okay to have shitty characters do shitty things. Like, it's to show the possibility of human behavior. But Kirill really just didn't make sense as a character to me. Motivations were just all over the place. I just didn't think that his actions made sense. If you consider his childhood, if you consider who he grew up with, shouldn't there be some trauma bond? Shouldn't there be some loyalty? I hope more people read it though, so we can discuss it. And you can tell me if you feel the same way as me. The next book that disappointed me, Holy Boy. This book was so hyped up. An entire display at Kinokuniya. But I opened it and I was like, what the hell am I reading? Okay, like, it's not even the premise, you know. The premise is totally fine. If you have read Misery or The Hole by Hae-yeon, then you will be familiar with context that's going on here. So there is a K-pop idol. He's been kidnapped and he is being imprisoned by 4 women. The issue here is the representation of the crazy fangirls. I know they are crazy fangirls. I know that the oldest one there, the auntie, she is a pedophile, right? She was into this K-pop idol back when he was just a young boy. He was mesmerized by his face. In fact, all of them, they were mesmerized by his face. He seems to have the face that is the masculine version of Helen of Troy. That is the implication. His beauty drives women to extremes. Good, these are women in male-dominated fields. However, I think that the depictions of the crazy fangirls are not done in good faith, and I think that these are actually misogynistic mockery of ordinary K-pop fans. The entire book, you don't even get to hear from the K-pop idol himself, his inner thoughts, or how he became a K-pop idol. What were his motivations? Why did he become an idol? What did he go through to become an idol? What were his struggles? What is he proud of? What kind of person is he? None of that is shown. We only get to know him after he has been drugged and imprisoned, and when he is basically not there anymore. So he's just like a shell. He's a puppet, in fact, kind of like a glorified sex doll. And there is a sex doll of him over there as well. The entire book is just about the 4 women who take turns to rape their K-pop idol. It's not saying anything meaningful about K-pop as an industry or the experience of being an idol. I don't think it is displaying any form of empathy towards idols or the fans. It is just a story created for a lot of shock value. And then when they tried to create like a backstory, it was done in such a way that made it seem as if women's desires for idols was something sordid that you should react with disgust to. And I really wanted to like it. I really wanted to like it. I think if you are looking for books about idols, you could try Idol Burning by Rin Usami, or even better, you can read this other book that I'm going to talk about later called The Forest Called You by Amiu. 200 Monas by Jan Saenz. I don't even know where to begin. Let's begin with my shock that this book was allowed in the National Library. So if you don't know about Singapore, Singapore has really strict drug laws. Like, if you are caught with drugs, you could get the death penalty, because this is a country with a death penalty. But if you are like a serial rapist, your life is okay. No one is going to execute you. Criminal value assigned to different things in this country. When I read this book, I was like, oh, why is this allowed in this country? The inner Singaporean government came out. It's kind of like saying that it's okay for people to take drugs. A good thing if the drug can bring you pleasure. Like, it's okay to sell drugs if you are desperate. That's the That's the story lah, basically. So there is somebody, her mom dies, and then it turns out that her mom was supposed to help a violent drug dealer sell a drug. This drug helps people, especially women, get orgasms. She is in deep trouble because she has like 24 hours to sell the drug, to give the money to the crazy loan sharks. She enlists the help of this very hot drug dealer, and I'm like, oh, drug dealers are hot in this book. I was really conflicted in my heart because I had the Singaporean upbringing. Like, drug dealers are dangerous, you don't go near them, say no to drugs, etc, etc. And then it's like, oh, you give me this really hot character who is described as being a sex god, and then he is also a drug dealer, and he is a good guy. That's the thing. Everybody here who is selling drugs, they are good guys. Okay, maybe not the loan sharks. You know what I mean? Like, everybody here has a backstory. Everybody here is humanized. It's very unexpected. At some point, the parts about her being really horny were a bit too much. I get that it's dark comedy, and yes, it is very dark sometimes. Yes, it is also very comedic. It's very interesting to see that there is such thing as a heroic drug dealer in this book. But they are just too horny from start to end. From the start, maybe you can, but like in the middle, maybe they should tamp down the horniness a little bit. Some parts of the story just didn't make sense. Like how this guy didn't want this girl that he just met like 2 days ago to become one of his mother's mentees. Whoever becomes his mother's mentee ends up successful later in life. What is the issue here? A lot of these problems are made up. That's just my opinion. The fourth book, Fake Accounts by Laurel Oyler. I have no issue with Dan's books. This is clearly literary fiction. If it was not printed with extra tiny font, it could easily be a 400-page novel, I think. However, my issue is that this entire book could have been cut in half. Like, you could have just removed certain chapters and it would not change the outcome of the reading experience. The plot itself, there was not enough going on in the plot to justify the sheer density of the prose and of the length of the book itself. TLDR, it's about this woman who is with this guy that she doesn't even really like that much, and then she finds out that he has a secret Instagram account. He is like super duper popular. So on the outside he looks normal, but he is running this conspiracy theory account. And instead of breaking up with him properly or like confronting him about it, she doesn't really do anything. And then after that he dies. I need to spoil this for you, okay? It's a fake death. Like, he faked his own death. You know what? I get it. He fakes his own death, but she thinks that he is dead. So she goes to Berlin and then she starts living in a slightly more reckless way. The only parts that I appreciated about this book were the parts that criticized journalism. Those were quite interesting, but I think they could have been a separate book. Her being a journalist has no bearing whatsoever on the story. Last one, Esther Is Now Following You by Tanya, Sweeney. I really wanted to like this book. So it's about this woman who has had many miscarriages. Her relationship with her husband is not great, even though he is a good husband. She suspects that he's starting an affair or something with his colleague, his work wife basically. And then she becomes obsessed with this actor. She really just spends all her time stalking him. She joins a Facebook group full of younger women who are also his big fans. She even abandons her life to fly across the world so that she can try to stalk him and be near his house. She does this by making friends with his sister, makes the sister think that she also lost her child, befriends the sister, moves into the sister's house. They become good friends until the sister gets a boyfriend. She suddenly wants to have her own space to enjoy her new romance, right? She feels like she hasn't gotten close enough to the actor yet, so she needs to continue staying in the actor's sister's house. Her main issue is that she is not supported well enough in her community. It's not just her husband not supporting her, that's one thing, right? But her friends were not good to her. Her mom was not good to her. She just didn't have a support network, which was why she was so mentally and emotionally vulnerable to idol worship. I just felt like this entire story, the stakes were not high enough. I felt like the character did not really learn anything. She managed to run away before she got caught, but she didn't really have any kind of epiphany or breakthrough. 10 books that I really liked for my Q2 wrap-up officially. Yeah, book 1, Unease, Life in Singapore Families by Professor Teo Yo Yen. This is a non-fiction sociological study of how people do family in Singapore. If you are not familiar with Singapore, I would say that this does give you a bit of a crash course on what Singaporeans go through, especially with regards to the education system. However, it doesn't just talk about that. It also talks about the division of labor between parents and why is it so difficult to parent in Singapore specifically. I do think that many countries do have their own parenting challenges, and then there are some countries that, you know, are touted as the best place to raise children. Singapore is not one of those. The only thing we have going for us is our security, right, and our safety, like the low crime rate. Not no crime, is low crime. Is low crime rate the only thing that matters? Are there not countries that also have low crime rate, but their children are not committing suicide? So, I think this book definitely helps local people articulate a lot of the discontent and the trauma that everybody goes through. If you talk to literally any Singaporean who has gone through the public school system, you will find something in common to complain about. If you grew up here, if you got married here, and you would like to know more about, you know, why are people like that, this book definitely. I've met people who were either newly in Singapore or they were in Singapore for a very short time for work-related reasons. And when I asked them, how is it different here? Especially if they are teachers, I ask, how are the students here different compared to the students back home? Invariably, they will tell me that Singaporean students are so good, they take their studies so seriously, but they also do have a lot of anxiety when it comes to their grades. They want to know specifically how much they got for a particular assignment. They are like busy calculating how they can get that A. They want to be given templates for how to complete an assignment. This is the result, right, of growing up here. Like, this is not something that is in our genes. This is something that I would say was trained into us. In fact, needing to have a template to feel safe, needing to have a sample essay to copy, to model. The idea also that if you just follow the model essay and if you copy the template, you are guaranteed to at least minimally pass. The needing of that reassurance is very, very Singaporean. If you're a parent, definitely read this book. You have to read this book. I'm so serious. I wouldn't say that it manages to talk about the entire parenting experience here in Singapore. But if you are one of those parents who was thinking, do I really need to send my 3-year-old to enrichment class? This book is for you, because I felt so seen reading this book. And I also think that even if you are not a parent, if you are a child in Singapore, you will see your experience reflected here. I think this book needs to be read in tandem with other books that I think helped inform my reading of it. So, Of Woman Born, Motherhood as Experience and Institution by Adrienne Rich. If you are a mother, an aspiring mother, or you want to know more about why your mother is like that, read this book, because this really puts into words what it is like. Next book, A Mouthful of Dust. This is part of a series. So this is book 6 of the Singing Hills cycle. Book 7 just came out. My friend already has the book, but she says that she will lend her copy to me only in August. Every single book in this series is so good. It features a recurring character, Cleric Chi, who is non-binary, because clerics have to be non-binary. Their job is to go around and collect stories, records. Memory being very important, memory being the bedrock of society. Cleric Chi goes around to very dangerous parts of the world sometimes, and they face a lot of problems, a lot of threats to their life, and also they are accompanied most of the time by their 内心, which is like a talking parrot. But the thing is, it's not a parrot. It is a 内心. It only looks like a parrot. Does that make sense? You have to read the series, okay? So this is book 6. But I think it doesn't really matter which order you read it in, because the stories are not related to each other. They are like different parts of the map, you know what I mean? So it doesn't matter which route you take, so long as you take the route. So in this particular installment, Cleric Chi is investigating a famine, and it was a really bad famine, such that it made people turn to cannibalism. There is a famine monster that features in this book. This monster is like a ginormous bird. It's I envisioned it a little bit as like a 5-meter tall vulture. That was how I saw it in my head. The story goes that this vulture only lets people go if they can give him something that he has never eaten before. And the idea of eating here is not just about food. It is also about metaphysical things, metaphorical things. And this story, particularly, I would say all the other stories as well, are a little bit like puzzle boxes. You have layers and layers and layers. The cleric Chi's job is to slowly sift through the different pieces and put together the main story. It's always an enjoyable experience when I read one of her books. I really like this author. Okay, book 3, The Woman Who Climbed Trees by Smriti Ravindra. This book does not have enough hype. I'm so serious. Everyone is sleeping on this book. This book, I feel in my heart, should have won like a Booker Prize. You know, mediocre books are being hyped up like crazy. And then insanely good books like this one, nobody talks about it. Not a peep. I had to recommend it to my library and nobody was fighting me for it. And then the funny thing is that people will eat up books like Pachinko, right? Which I'm not saying is bad. I do love Pachinko as well. I do see Pachinko as one of the best 21st century novels. But this book needs to be right next to Pachinko. So how would I describe it? Something like a realist, multi-generational epic. It is set in both Nepal and India, and the focus is on the women in these really patriarchal institutions. And then you can see how they turn into women who enforce the same suffering on their own descendants. There is also the political layer to it about the relationship between India and Nepal. The people who grow up along the border, they may not be able to choose one side so easily. The book starts out with a character called Meena. She is 14, but she's married off an older guy, and she has to go to Nepal to live with his mother in her house. And then the husband just like leaves her there and then goes to work. And she is dealing with her mother-in-law. And her mother-in-law is abusive as fuck. She did accept some of the abuse because there is a limit to what a daughter-in-law can do when you are not a daughter. In the end, the only thing that she could fight back in was verbally abusing the mother-in-law back because the mother-in-law started it, okay? I did want her to throw a punch or two, but she didn't. That's the thing, this is not fantasy. She can't throw a punch or two. Becoming a young woman in this kind of environment then changes her. She starts out a child, full of hope, full of sweetness, but then she becomes bitter. You can literally see her corrode in real time. Later on, when she has her own children, she tries to do better. That's the nice thing she does. She tries to treat them better, especially for her daughter. But I still found it really sad because there is a limit to what she can do, being just a woman. Another really unexpected thing that I enjoyed in this book was the representation of sapphic relationships. All this has to happen not out in the open, but privately behind closed doors. But when you're reading it, you don't get the sense that this is something surprising. In a world like that, who else is there to love other than the woman who is suffering right next to you? Okay, book 4, Door Parts by Penny Zhang. You look at the name. Honestly, I thought that this was a Chinese writer because of the surname. I know some people with the surname Zhang, but this is not a Chinese Zhang, so I don't know how to pronounce it. Is it Zhang? The whole time I was reading it, I was like, Penny Zhang, Penny Zhang. Then I flipped to the author page and I was like, oh, that is not the Penny Zhang I had in my head. Fun fact. Continuing. This, I would say, is a little bit closer to dark academia. It does talk about the abuse of power within educational institutions, although that is not exactly the main point here. The main point is this friendship between two girls, Nikki and Sadie. They reminded me very much of two other books that I read when I was younger and I was a bit obsessed about friendships in girls' schools. Moth Diaries and The Candy Darlings. So these two girls were best friends. They grew estranged and then they haven't spoken to each other. 2 decades later, by then, one of them, Nikki, has already become an influencer, quite a big one, and she writes books and she has email newsletters and she's using like a persona, the persona that she actually created back when she was in school. This persona of a preppy girl best friend who goes like, hey bitch, and everything like that. The only person that knows that it is her persona is her old best friend, Sadie. Sadie attended the funeral, which was where she met Nikki's husband. But she did end up hooking up with the ex-husband and then she got pregnant, so he kept her in the house where Nikki used to live. I think she assumed that he would marry her, but there truly was no guarantee for it. And this guy is like really popular with all the women in the neighborhood. You can kind of smell it a mile away. So back when they were girls, and they were girls together, they were in a school that had this thing called a Sylvia Club. Sylvia Plath. It came about because there was a history of girls killing themselves. So the school is haunted that not everybody can see. Nikki, when she was still a student, she was trying to investigate the Sylvia Club. And Sadie finds out that even in adulthood, she was still trying to investigate the Sylvia Club. After she died, Sadie took over the investigation. She became responsible for keeping Nikki's daughter safe. So Sadie is in the house, postpartum fugue, being haunted by Nikki's ghost, trying to investigate what Nikki was doing before she died, trying to protect Nikki's daughter, trying to figure out who is this man whose child she just gave birth to, and what does she really know about him. And the reason why I recommend this book is because I think throughout all of that, at no point was the love between Nikki and Sadie ever in doubt. These were girls that really loved each other. They really were best friends. Even in death, can you predict which of your best friends is going to sleep with your husband after you die? I cannot, like genuinely. I don't think I know anybody that well. But the idea that Nikki knew Sadie so well, she knew her so well that even 20 years later she could predict exactly what Sadie would do, and she could leave coded messages for her that she knew Sadie would understand. That kind of friendship is really beautiful. Book 5, Nymph by Sophia Montrone. This I think is a debut novel. I managed to get an advanced reader copy from the publisher via NetGalley, and I really loved it. I was mesmerized by the writing. I was mesmerized by the story, the setting, by everything. I felt like I was watching a movie that had this gauzy filter over it. I could almost feel the Italian summer. Even though I live in Singapore and I have the Singaporean summer, in my head the Italian summer is different. It's better. I know it's probably not, but it's just like the imagination. That the way this book is written, it really ignites the imagination. So the main character, she's called Leonora. Her family has a family business running an inn in a crumbling villa in the Italian countryside. So at the start of the story, she's 10 years old and she is just starting to learn the ropes of caring for the place. There's a lot to do. She has to learn how to tidy the room, how to clean the room, how to prepare the food. Her father was still around then. Spoiler alert, he dies. The mother was lying in bed the whole day because she had headaches very easily, which I totally understand. I also get headaches every day. I wish I could just lie in bed all day. Father seems to be writing a book and he's telling stories from the Odyssey to his daughter. She worships him, but he seems to be very emotionally distant, even if he is physically present. So 10 years later, Leo is about to go to college and she is working in the villa again for the summer. Her grandmother, who used to run the place, is starting to fail. You know, it's old age. There is this idea of the villa itself crumbling. Her grandmother is crumbling, and both of these represent her childhood. She's on the cusp of adulthood. She's about to become a college-going kid. She's going to another country entirely. This beautiful summer with beautiful dying things is not going to last. Very elegiac. Her last summer before starting college, there is an American girl who shows up, Dolores, and she's looking for a job. So she hires Dolores because she's attracted to her, and they have a short summer fling. When I say fling, right, it makes it sound like it was inconsequential and it didn't really do anything to her, but honestly I think this relationship that she had with Dolores, even though they both knew that it was never going to last, it was very defining for Leo. It helped her clarify a lot of the things that she wanted in her own life, and in a way I think she threw herself towards this relationship because she was trying to avoid thinking about her father who committed suicide a few years ago. But that's the thing, being in love does not magically heal all your wounds, and I think that is something that Leo realizes later on. Book 6, Seesaw Monster / Spin Monster by Kotaro Isaka. So this book, right, I don't have it with me right now because I borrowed it from the library. It's like a dual book in one. So you read it like this and then you flip it around. In a way they can be standalones, but they are also interconnected in the sense that one is in the past and one is in the present. Okay, not the past. One is in the present and one is in the future. Like the futuristic future, the psychopath anime type of future. So in the present, can I even call it the present? Okay, it's the past. Fine, it's the past. The first book, Seesaw Monster, which is the first book I think to me, but you can read it the other way too, it's fine. but I would say start with Seesaw Monster. There is a retired spy, then she got married, and her mother-in-law is also kind of acting really suspiciously. So she goes to her agency and gets her agency, her ex-agency, because she quit, right? Because Japanese women quit their jobs when they get married. Gets them to investigate her mother-in-law. There are also multiple attempts on her life, like a guy that burst into her house and tried to stab her with a knife. Did her mother-in-law send this guy? Is her mother-in-law secretly the enemy trying to get rid of her? It's a really exciting, fast-paced story, and I would say that the ending is quite satisfying. Then you flip the book around and you start reading Spin Monster. Spin Monster is set in a techno-dystopian future. So government surveillance is very intense in this story. I actually thought it was written in like 2023. Then I flipped to the back and I realized, hey, it's actually written in like 2019. What? How did they know it was gonna become like that? How prescient, right? It was even earlier than the TV show Pantheon. You know TV show Pantheon? I think everyone should watch Pantheon. So in Spin Monster, there is dangerous AI trying to create fake wars, trying to incite civil unrest, and policemen are corrupt and evil. Because of the kind of environment where security is no longer guaranteed online, people have gone back to using analog ways. So they don't send emails anymore. They hire like a human courier to hand deliver a letter. The main character is a guy whose job is that he's a courier. He delivers things in person. Until one day he gets interrupted and then he gets caught up in a conspiracy from decades ago. I would definitely recommend these two. Read them back to back if you are into spy thrillers or mystery novels. The Forest Called You by Amil. I mentioned this just now. I really liked it. I really liked her short story collection, which was called Roadkill. I'm trying to get everybody to read it, but it's so difficult to convince people to pick up short story collections. But yes, Roadkill, really good. And I think when you read it, you'll be like, wow, this author is something. She's imaginative. How does she come up with stories like that? If she didn't write in Korean, I'm almost certain she would have an international hype. I'm not sure why her books are not being marketed particularly well. I'm marketing them now. The Forest Called You is a novel, which is very exciting for me. It's set in the 23rd century, so the years are like 2 something something. In this futuristic world, there is a virus. This virus has the side effect of making its sufferers become VR intolerant. Their bodies literally reject it. Problem is, a lot of the money-making industries, they have moved on to VR because people need to quarantine and stay at home and not catch the virus. So the VR industry is booming. If you cannot tolerate VR, you are essentially cut off from like 50% of the world. The main character, she comes from Seoul, and Seoul at that time has become a slum. It's like a place where people cannot leave because they don't have enough money. Even if you are rich, you are still from Seoul. So you are never ever going to be on the same level as a poor person from another part of the world. The main character, Soup, she is a VR reject and she lives in this world and she's bullied relentlessly. The ringleader is the richest girl over there, which is a very typical situation. But Soup, she loves the music of a particular K-pop idol. She doesn't just love the look, but she loves the music itself. So the K-pop idol, Iche, she is a VR idol on top of being a real idol. So idols, they have to follow very strict rules. They have to eat real food because their fans live vicariously through them, but they also need to have real beauty. So you cannot use VR to make yourself look skinny. You need to be genuinely skinny. That is the whole point of being an idol, that you have natural beauty, and you have to be good at singing for real. You have to be good at dancing for real. If not, you are not worthy of the worship that you receive. Iche is suffering from some kind of eating disorder, and she was actually originally from Seoul. So her company decides to send her to Seoul to film a music video in her old school, making it sound like it was a beautiful, nostalgic, if rundown place. A little bit like the romanticization of Inaka places. The idea is to film nostalgia-driven music video where she's in school, wow, real school with real friends. She's in love with this teddy bear, and then she does PE with her friends, runs down corridors to make it in time for morning assembly with other girls. Soup manages to get a slot in the music video because she was upfront about it. She said she needed the money, and the company was trying to look for people like that who wasn't too attached to Iche because they didn't want them to try to kidnap the idol or something. They hired Soup, and then Soup got heavily bullied for it, and because of that, Iche became very protective of her. They started a friendship, which then became a fling. But the thing is, Iche has to go back, Soup is going to remain. So they do have to say goodbye. But before that happens, they manage to convey their feelings to each other. It's a little bit YA, but I would also say that it has really dark themes. Last 3 books. Book number 8, Free to Play, a video games anthology by Difference Engine. I recently went for the launch. It was a lot of fun. When I saw early reviews, because I didn't get to it until a few weeks after other people got to it, it didn't get rated as highly as I thought it would, because a lot of it are non-fiction essays and people are just not about that life. I think a lot of people opened it expecting to see comics about different games, but that's not really the purpose of this anthology. I feel like if you really wanted to read comic anthologies, Difference Engine has other comic anthologies. You don't need to read this one. This one is just an anthology about the topic of video games. So there is a balance of creative non-fiction, comics, a poem. But majority definitely, I think, is non-fiction. Essays on Pokemon, Skyrim, they are all really well written. So I give it 5 stars. I don't think there is anything more to want from this anthology if you go in with the expectation that it is mostly essay. But if you go in expecting fiction, cute short stories or comics, then you will be disappointed. So you need to go in with the correct expectation. Video games are analyzed in the world of academia, but I think it can be done more. One thing I appreciate about this anthology is that it is not exactly academic, although it does challenge the reader to use certain lens to see the relationship between games and the people playing these games in a particular way. Book 9, The Tyranny of Lies by Elaine Villamadruga, translated by Kevin Jerry Dunn. Okay, this book is one of those books where it is dark comedy and then you're reading it and you're like, oh, everybody here is fucked up. They're fucked in the head. And on top of that, it is disgusting. We're talking about excrements. You know, the concept of the grotesque is in play here right now. But I still couldn't help but give it like a 5 star. It's so clever. I just think it's so clever. When I was reading it, I was disgusted, but I couldn't stop reading. So this is set in a world that sounds very much like Cuban dictatorship, but obviously it is not explicitly Cuban dictatorship. There is some kind of parody going on. In the household, this man used to be the right-hand man of the dictator. However, he has since fallen out of favor because his relatives were caught trying to bomb the dictator. He still walks around wearing his medals because he cannot get over the fact that he used to be such an important man. It is said quite explicitly and also implied he used to assist the dictator in arresting and torturing people. So he got his power not by being everybody's best friend. He actually got his power through oppressing the common people. This is now his comeuppance. He married a woman whose entire family killed themselves because they received a prophecy from a god who spoke through her aunt, and her aunt was a really precocious little girl who did nothing except draw very photorealistic pictures of animals. And the moment she started drawing butterflies, there was this prophecy that if she starts drawing butterflies, it means that the declaration for death is coming soon. So this mother, she was the sole survivor. She was given food separate from the poisoned food, and then her entire family just committed mass suicide. And the only reason why they left her alive is because somebody else has to carry on the legacy. So she gave birth to 3 kids, 2 daughters, 1 son. Her youngest daughter is also a prodigy toddler who doesn't talk but can draw very well. Really hyper focused on just drawing animals, elephants, and then flies, and eventually butterflies. However, nobody died. The eldest daughter, where do I start? Her sexuality is clearly deviant, but I don't think that we are meant to see it as wrong. So she has lust for inanimate objects, specifically like bridges. So she believes that a bridge some blocks away is her lover. The brother, when animals see him, they will run towards him to touch him because touching him will make them die. He's also harboring a secret crush on his cousin. At the same time, he is also creating a sculpture made out of animal carcasses that he ends up with when the animals run towards him and die. He stores it in the basement where the father doesn't know. And the father is upstairs going crazy. Everyone in this household, they just don't love each other, which is not the point. I don't think they need to love each other. There is this idea being introduced here that if a family is a country in miniature, the family members then are subjects to be ruled by their great leader. And their great leader in this case is the father. Father decides that he needs to be the one to fix his fucked up family. He has lost his mind and he regresses back to when he was still working under dictator. He starts treating his family members as the prisoners that he helped to torture in the past. There's a lot of taboo being shown here because I feel like the point of showing so many taboo things in this book is to make you think, why is it even taboo to begin with? Okay, the daughter, you know, she loves to fuck bridges, but who is she hurting, right? And the toddler doesn't talk to anybody and she's really antisocial and she doesn't love her family at all. She just wants to draw. Why do we expect children to love their parents unconditionally when the parents don't love them? And if you extend that to the macrocosm, how can you ask subjects to love their governments if the governments don't love their subjects? Yes! Similar reads, I would say, Woodworm by Leila Martinez, which I love and I recommend this book all the time because if you can take horror and ghosts, you should read this book. Another book that I felt matched this book in terms of like, oh, I'm kind of disgusted reading it, Lapvona by Otessa Moshfegh. Last book, Boring Asian Female by Chanwen Xu. Xu Chanwen. Yeah, Xu Chanwen. This book is crazy. It's batshit crazy. After I told my friend what happened in this book, so many of them went to borrow it because they wanted to experience the crazy for themselves. It's about this Chinese American woman, young woman, Chinese American young woman wants to go to Harvard Law. She will do anything, go to Harvard Law. She gets rejected from Harvard Law. She finds out that this other Asian American girl who comes from a much richer family, much more privileged background, she got into Harvard Law. So she becomes obsessed with this girl who got into Harvard Law and she becomes a stalker. So the problem with this girl, Elizabeth, is that I don't even know if I can say she's the product of her environment because her parents are not like that. I'm not sure Elizabeth's flaws can be attributed to her parents or even her environment. Perhaps they're just innate. So she sees everything in percentile. She has this really good friend, Eunji, and she's like, oh, she is in the 90th percentile for beauty, 90th percentile for desirability, and everything is about percentiles. To her, she looks at people and she goes 60th percentile face, 50th percentile brains, that kind of thing. It's quite bad. When she finds out that Laura got into Harvard Law, she becomes really obsessed with Laura because to her, she can't believe that somebody with a lower percentile than her could get in. She was certain that Harvard Law might have like made a mistake, but then at the same time, she didn't want to harass them over email. She starts to stalk Laura all the way back to Laura's room. She tries to create a fake blog to write very racist things so she can frame Laura for it. She tries to create a fake account as somebody's sister asking for college application advice so she can email Laura and try to get Laura's college application emails. She really goes all out and then she gets pregnant. She's supposed to abort the baby, but then she thinks, if I am a single mother, I will be more interesting. I won't be a boring Asian female anymore and Harvard will let me into their program. So she decides to keep the baby. Isn't that terrifying? Can you imagine if that's your mom? She had you just so she could have an interesting story for Harvard Law. I couldn't even tell, you know. I thought she was in love with Laura. It's like, does she want her or does she want to be her? Or could it be both? Or is it that she doesn't know how to want her, so she can only want to be her? Or is it that because she wants to be her, she ends up wanting her? In the end, she kills Laura. I don't think this is hard to see coming. Like, it has to happen. And then she gets away with it. Somebody else takes the blame for it because all Asian women look the same on CCTV to white people. What really elevated this book to like, oh, this is crazy, to oh, this is really crazy. The book itself, the author, does not want to give us a good and moral ending. The good and moral ending, right, is when this person did something bad. So something bad will happen to them and then they will live the rest of their lives regretting it. It doesn't happen like this. In fact, I would say that she gets away with the murder. She still gets into Harvard Law. She loses the baby, but like that's not an issue. It was only ever going to be a prop. So she gets her happy ending, even though she did so many things. The real punishment, I think, is the loss of her friend. Her friend manages to figure out what she did, but her friend didn't intervene. I think her friend was the kind that withheld judgment. She knew that Elizabeth was going through something. She didn't condemn her and she didn't expose or report her, but she leaves Elizabeth in the end. She goes to another country and that was the end of their friendship, and it was a very big loss because she was a good person. And the really sad thing is that I don't think Elizabeth realizes at the end just what she has lost, because all she can think about is what she got, right? She got to Harvard Law. That last bit, it did create a sense of tragedy, I feel, that elevated the book for me. It is still tragic, even if the main character doesn't realize it's tragic, right? It's tragic for the reader because we know better. Today we talked about 10 books that I liked but which I didn't really go in depth because they're already so popular. Everybody's talking about them. You don't need me to sell it to you, but please go and read them. 5 books that I really thought I would like but I ended up not liking, and then 10 books that I thought were really good but it seems like nobody's talking about them and I want everybody to read them. So yeah, please read the books. I hope that you will like them as much as I did. When is Q3? Q3 is now, July, August, September. Yes? So I will see you again for my Q3 wrap up in October. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.